Chapter 17 of Hopes, Part 1. Twilight grimaced, trying not to squirm under the piercing gazes of the ponies around her. There were only a few, thankfully. She'd been whisked away to some secluded cell as soon as she convinced the strange ponies living in the mountain that she wasn't an immediate threat. Her hooves all clasped in sturdy chains and spears pointed at her throat by at least 2 soldiers at any given moment. She had been given perhaps 10 minutes to collect herself, while the mountain ponies deliberated amongst themselves as to her fate. And then the questions had begun. It started out simple enough. Who was she? Where had she come from? What was she? The truth wasn't an option, so she improvised. Luckily, Twilight had been in this situation before, back when Sea Saber salvage team had first found her and her friends, so she based her story off of that. She told them that she was lost, that she didn't know what happened, that she wanted to find her friends. They weren't satisfied, and Twilight couldn't blame them. Ponies would cycle in and out of her cell, asking the same questions in 100 variations, leaving her alone for short periods while they thought of what to ask next. It was exhausting. Midnight had been oddly silent throughout it all. Twilight would have expected the proud entity to protest the instant she let them shackle her in chains, to demand that they break free, slaughter everyone in sight, and resume their journey north, but no. She could feel it inside, withdrawn back to that dark corner of her mind where it seemed most comfortable. Like the ponies around her, it too seemed to be mulling over some sort of mystery. Twilight wasn't too worried about it. She expected it would come back soon enough, as irritable and demanding as ever, so she used the rare solace to analyze her surroundings. There wasn't much to see from where she was, and she didn't want to risk antagonizing her hosts by sending out magical pings. She was in a small, windowless room of hewn stone with a single thick iron door. A prison cell. In contrast, she had learned much from the questions she had been asked. She knew that she was in a mining colony on the far northern edge of modern Equestria. Rather than a miraculous holdout of pre-flood Equestria that had survived underwater for centuries, she had stumbled across a subsurface facility not even 50 years old. In some ways, it was even more impressive than an ancient Equestrian survivor would have been. These ponies found this mountain peak far north of their homes, over 100 meters underwater, and burrowed their way into its core in search of precious metals, pumping out countless tons of water and building the infrastructure to haul cargo to and from the surface. If she wasn't so worried about them branding her a corporate spy, she could have spent hours questioning them. But these were hard ponies. They were rough in every way. They were the type of ponies who left the world behind, traveled to the farthest frontier of the charted world, and risked death daily to carry out the jobs they had taken on.
So let me get this straight.
Brandybuck, the Pegasus mare who Twilight had learned was a shift manager in the colony, stared her down with unconcealed skepticism.
You want us to believe that you woke up in the middle of our mountain, no memory of how you got here, slit eyes, dripping blood, and fangs in your mouth, met Bag End, who you claim was out alone, fought off a crystal spider on your own, and then teleported past our main lock looking for a doctor?
Twilight gulped. Her eyes darted between the 2 other ponies listening in, both with equally suspicious scowls.
Yes?
The Earth Stallion to her left, who everyone referred to only as Proud, cleared his throat. I think I've got a more plausible story, he growled. Your employer inserted you via submarine near one of our drainage tunnels. You ambushed Bag End and his partner, butchered one of them, made up some drivel about a crystal spider, and then teleported past our main lock disguised as some kind of weird, hoping to compromise our shell in the chaos. Twilight had been distraught when the questioning first began, but by now the distress had given way to an exhausted persistence.
I just wanted to help,
she said quietly.
I don't want to hurt you. I'm telling the truth. I think it's pretty clear to everyone here you aren't telling the truth.
Her third interrogator, a unicorn mare named Peony Burrows, seemed to be the one in charge. She didn't speak often, but the others always listened when she did.
We're minors, not idiots.
She leaned in, narrowing her eyes curiously.
What do you even have to lose in honesty? A common pony would get themselves popped for attempted sabotage, but a gifted? No, I expect you'd do just fine. You give up one employer and whichever heartless richling owns this dump now would be sure to sign you on without hesitation.
She shook her head with a sigh.
Do you really think whatever sub dropped you off is still out there? We've gone through a whole shift since you were caught, Philly. They've already written you off as a loss. Well, I'm not a spy!
Twilight insisted. How many times had she told them that now?
Please, I haven't hurt anyone!
Brandy snorted.
Care to explain the chunks of meat we found in your bag, then?
Her lip curled back as she shook her head.
Disgusting. Butchering a pony like that? Why are we still here, little flower?
Twilight stiffened. Midnight was standing in the shadows behind her three interrogators, its expression distant.
These chains are bereft of magic,
it observed, gesturing towards the cold iron around her hooves.
We could leave at any moment.
What are you looking at? Proud's brow furrowed as he glanced in Midnight's direction. Brandy's tail flicked about behind her as she turned to Peony.
This mare's wasting our time. She ain't gonna give us anything.
Twilight froze as she scrambled to supply a sufficient excuse.
I don't want to frighten them.
Midnight cocked its head.
We have already frightened them.
Peony corked her lip.
Yep, you're right. Celestia knows Corpora won't give us overtime for this. You two get some rest. I'll write it up.
The three ponies filed out of the cell, followed shortly by the pair of spear-bearing guards. They kept the tips of their weapons trained on Twilight's throat every step of the way, lowering them only to quickly slam the iron door shut. The loud bang of the door slamming rang in Twilight's ears. Once again, she was alone with Midnight.
You're overflowing with lies, my sweet blossom,
Midnight cooed. It was next to her now, leaning its cold phantom form up against her side.
You lied to them about our purpose, and now you lie to yourself about yours. When will you learn?
Twilight sighed. Her ears drooped as she looked down at her hooves. Midnight peered back up at her, reflected in the stone as if it was water.
I was hoping things would go better than this. New friends.
Midnight frowned as it said the words, sounding them out as if they were foreign to it.
Explain this. What? You claimed it as your goal earlier, did you not? Explain.
Twilight furrowed her brow.
I don't understand the question. You know what friends are?
It nodded.
Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash, Applejack, Rarity, Fluttershy.
It recited the names like it was reading from a list.
Our friends. None of them are here.
It arched a brow.
Why do you concern yourself with the lives of the worms that dwell in this mountain? They are ponies.
Twilight corrected.
Not worms. They are beneath our attention. Why?
Twilight leaned in, tucking her legs underneath her as she came almost nose to nose with her dark reflection.
Why are they beneath us? They are not our friends and they are not monsters.
Midnight cocked its head, eyeing her like a teacher regarding a particularly slow student.
They're there is no reason we would ever think of them. They could become our friends.
Midnight frowned. For a long time, it didn't say anything.
No, they can't. Why not? We have 5 friends,
it said.
We have always had 5 friends.
Twilight let out a tired sigh. She closed her eyes, pulling her senses inwards, and when she opened them, she was in her old library. Of course, it wasn't really her library. She could smell the flavorful spices of Spike's cooking, but she knew if she followed the scent, she would only see an empty kitchen. Aloysius's cage waited by the door, empty, the bars stained with old blood. Every curtain was drawn tight, leaving the room dim, except for the slowly shifting red glow that bloomed past them, casting barely visible shadows that seemed to creep around the corners of her vision. Midnight was seated at her reading table, a blank book opened before it. It watched her curiously as she walked up the stairs to her bedroom, and when she opened the door, it was waiting for her inside, perched on the edge of the bed. Twilight's horn glowed, and the lavender aura of her magic wrapped around a small picture frame propped up on her bedside table.
You share my memories, right? Or you can see them?
Midnight nodded, so she levitated the picture up to its bloodied eyes. It was an image Twilight knew well. She had spent hundreds of mornings waking up, rolling over, and smiling at that moment frozen in time, of her with her 5 closest friends all together on a sunny Ponyville day.
They weren't always my friends, you know,
Twilight said.
We've only known each other for a couple of years, really.
Midnight frowned.
And before that? I didn't really understand friendship before that. But they are our friends now.
Midnight frowned, looking away as a thought.
How did you compel them like this? You can see my memories,
Twilight said leadingly. She gave the photograph a little shake.
Yes.
Midnight's brow furrowed. It looked up to Twilight, then back to the picture, and repeated the motion a couple more times. Finally, it looked away with a disdainful scoff, its tail whipping about behind it.
This is a foolish waste of time. We should leave this place and resume our journey to the frozen north.
Twilight smiled patiently.
We were kind to each other. We shared our experiences with each other, made new ones together, and supported each other in our goals.
She turned to the picture toward herself, her smile growing wider as she thought back to the memories.
That's how you make new friends. But what is the point?
Midnight asked.
You've yet to make any new friends since the floods. It must not be very important. Well, sure I have,
Twilight said.
Dusty Tailman and Star Trails are my friends, and I'd like to think Sea Saber and Flintlock, even Crazy Rich, are in their own ways.
Midnight scoffed.
Nonsense. I've been in tune with your emotions since my creation, little flower. What you feel for those weaklings is nothing like what you feel for our friends. Friendship is a spectrum, Midnight,
Twilight explained.
I may not be as close to Star Trails as I am with Pinkie Pie, but she's still my friend. And could you please stop insulting everyone?
It arched a brow.
It is not an insult to refer to a weakling, is what it is.
Twilight rolled her eyes as she replaced the photograph back on her bedside table.
Would you insult one of my friends? Our real friends or your false ones?
Twilight shot at an exasperated look. It responded with a satisfied smirk.
No, I would not. My friends weren't always my friends, and any pony we meet could become my friend, so you might end up insulting a future friend.
She leaned in.
And that would be bad, right?
Midnight seemed to think about this for a few seconds.
Why do we want new friends? Because...
Twilight hesitated, considering the question. If she went at this from her own perspective, of making new friends because they enriched her life and made her happy, no doubt Midnight would dismiss the notion. She had to try and phrase it in a way that it would understand.
Because friends make you stronger. If you face someone more powerful than you, friends can help you overcome it. And we want to be the strongest, right? We already are the strongest,
Midnight said, though not with its usual force. It was frowning down at its hooves, brow furrowed deep in thought.
If we wish to make these ponies our friends, why are you lying to them?
Twilight blinked. She was back in the pitch-black prison cell, the door swinging open and striking the stone wall with a ponderous thud. How long had she been left alone? A pair of spear ponies entered first, weapons trained on her, followed by peony burros and another limping stallion. It took her a moment to recognize him.
Bag End!
She smiled as she stood, only to freeze as the spear pony stepped closer.
You're okay.
So I am? He winced, a hoof rising to cradle his barrel. The uniform he had been wearing when she met him was gone, replaced by a loose-fitting jumpsuit of plain brown fabric. Some broken ribs, but I'll survive, thanks to you.
He got lucky,
Peony said. She kept her eyes on Twilight as she spoke, watching intently.
The spider seems to have bitten him around one of his suit's support rings.
Bag sighed as he sat heavily against the wall. A shame you weren't able to save my partner.
Partner?
But he had been alone when she found him. Proud had mentioned her killing his partner as well, hadn't he? She was just about to ask him what he meant when she caught the meaningful look in his eye. She put on an uneasy smile.
I did my best.
Peony cleared her throat, grabbing Twilight's attention.
So, Bag End has verified that you saved him from a spider, luckily for you. What he has not verified is how you managed to get into our minds, or the cause behind your...
She narrowed her eyes.
Appearance.
She left the statement hanging. Twilight glanced over to Bag, and when she looked back to Peony, she saw Midnight standing in the background, watching with a neutral expression. It was surreal that after so long with her dark passenger whispering for her to maim and slaughter and dominate, when she finally did meet new ponies, it was Midnight of all things that seemed to better know how to befriend them. Lies would only lead to more lies and more trouble. If she wanted these ponies to trust her, then she'd have to give them the truth, no matter how much it might frighten them. No matter how much it might frighten her. And so, taking a deep breath, Twilight began to speak. Jab, cut, spin, kick. There was the thud of impact, and the grunt from Sea Saber as Rainbow's hoof connected. She whirled, ready to capitalize, but Saber was quick to recover. The other Pegasus pushed herself back along the floor with her wings before rolling to her hooves, out of range. Rainbow and Applejack spent the day after the unwanted conversation with Silverblood in their cabin, each of the mares brooding over their respective grievances. The day passed slowly, broken up only by Star Trails inviting them to join her for dinner, and then returning later with some apples and bread when they had declined. The preening session brightened both of their moods somewhat, It had been awkward at first, but before long both of them were laughing at Applejack's clumsy attempts at fixing Rainbow's feathers and Rainbow's mock exasperation at guiding her. But still, the small relief from Applejack's companionship was nothing compared to the mental oblivion that Rainbow found in sparring with Sea Saber. She pressed her advantage, blasting Saber with gusts of wind from her wings to keep her off balance before closing in. Saber ducked left as she deflected a blow, disappearing into Rainbow's blind side. Rainbow's grin turned to a scowl. Saber was always exploiting her blind side in their spars, using it to get around her defenses. Just like Garrett. She flapped a wing, twirling in the air to bring a blade down on Saber with a sudden surge of fury. She clenched her jaw as Saber blocked the blow, the painful feedback flaring up Rainbow's wing. The brutality of the strike was enough to force Saber to the ground with a hiss of alarm, and Rainbow was on her in an instant. She straddled her tutor without hesitation and brought both blades to her neck, ending the bout. The grin came back twice as strong.
Dead.
Rainbow sucked in a breath, straining to hold the position despite the burning in her muscles. She stared into Saber's eyes expectantly as her chest heaved. Saber gave a little nod.
Dead.
Rainbow stepped back and helped Sea Saber back to her hooves. The gymnasium aboard the Orichalcum was everything Rainbow could have asked for. Weight machines and treadmills of all varieties dominated half the room, but the rest dedicated to an open area for sparring or calisthenics. A hallway on one side led to a couple buckball courts, and there was even a small side section cordoned off with showers and lockers. It was still morning, and there were only a few other ponies there besides them, all sporting the black jumpsuits that Rainbow had come to associate with the ship's security, so they had taken full advantage of the space. It was exhilarating to be able to stretch her wings and lose herself in the rush of adrenaline again.
Are you getting old, Saber?
Rainbow asked as they walked over to the bench where they had left their water.
Or am I getting good?
Saber winced as she sat down, grabbing her old canteen and taking a long drink.
Bit of the first, kind of the second.
Rainbow chuckled.
You sure you aren't taking it easy on me? That was 4 in a row. I'm afraid not.
Saber gave her a sidelong look.
Your form is sloppy, your strikes lack precision, and you drop your guard half the time you attack.
The corner of her lip pulled up into a small smirk.
If you weren't so strong and fast, you wouldn't stand a chance.
Rainbow paused. After some deliberation, she decided to take the comment as a compliment.
Well, I am the most awesome Pegasus in Equestria. I'd tell you not to be so cocky, but with your performance lately, you'd probably ignore it.
Saber sighed, standing up and stretching her wings.
I think we're done with sparring. Whoa, what?
Rainbow shot out of her seat.
We've barely started.
Saber arched a brow.
You need a partner on your level to learn with sparring, Rainbow Dash. You fight with several bad habits, but at this point, your grasp of the fundamentals is solid enough that your physical excellence more than makes up for them. So...
Rainbow bit her lip.
Does that mean we're done with my training?
Saber gave a curt shake of her head.
Negative. There are still drills you can do on your own to improve, and I can still coach you on technique, even if I can't beat it into you. For today, though, we are done. I'll need to draw up some new plans. Fine.
Rainbow sighed.
I guess I'll do some solo practice then. Just don't forget to clean your wing blades, and take a shower after,
Saber said.
The Argo should be flight ready tomorrow. You've been doing a good job keeping your head down. Keep it up.
Rainbow grinned, puffing her chest out.
Yes, ma'am.
With a satisfied nod, Saber turned and made for the locker area, leaving Rainbow on her own. After taking a few more seconds to sate her thirst and catch her breath, she threw herself back into her practice. It wasn't the same as sparring, of course. There was no competitive rush, no mindless tempo that she could lose herself in as she dedicated herself in body and mind to the defeat of an opponent. Drills gave her time to think whenever she stopped to reset her position, gave her time to see her own mistakes instead of leaving them behind in the frantic pace of a duel. But it was better than nothing. She saw Saber leaving the gym, refreshed after a shower, but didn't spare the other mare much thought. It was true that she'd been winning most of all their bouts today, and she could already feel herself receding into the same predictable patterns with every fight. It didn't matter if Saber knew exactly what she was going to do, because she was always there first. Rainbow wasn't sure how long she spent in that arena alone, refining her motions. She had learned long ago that looking at the clock only made time slow to a crawl, and unwanted thoughts to creep into the back of her mind. She would go until she couldn't go any longer, as she always had, even before the floods. That was the plan, at least.
Oh, Rainbow Dash.
Prince Silverblood's lilting voice shook her from her trance.
You certainly strike a menacing figure, my dear.
Rainbow looked up. Silverblood was watching her from a balcony set above the arena, previously unnoticed by her. Garrett stood behind him, seemingly half asleep.
What do you want?
Rainbow asked, unable to keep the contempt out of her voice.
Whatever it is, I'm not interested.
Oh, is that any way to talk to your host?
Silverblood winked as he leaned against the balcony railing.
I'm merely here to observe you in action. Everyone has need of security after all, and it's always good to keep an eye on the competition.
You want to see me in action? Come a little closer.
Rainbow's nostrils flared.
I'll give you all the action you could ever need.
He laughed, almost doubling over in amusement.
Oh, you are quite the mare, Rainbow Dash. But I don't pay for others to manage my well-being so that I can go about challenging gifted to duels.
He let out an exaggerated hum as he looked to his side.
I would be quite interested to see how you fare against my dear Garrett, however.
Rainbow stiffened. She looked to Garrett, who had now abandoned any pretense of laziness to regard her with a hawkish stare. A thrill of cold fear ran over her, but it was quickly burned up by a swell of anger. Why should she fear any griffin? Her lip curled back as she thought to the previous day, to him daring to touch her. She would make him pay for that.
You're on.
Garrett's wingspan was impressive. It was nearly twice her own, and it cast a menacing shadow over the arena as he stepped off the balcony and glided down to land before her. He took a moment to ruffle his feathers before looking back up to his employer.
Rules? Put your gloves on, Silverblood said. I'd hate to give her any new scars with those talons of yours.
No gloves,
Rainbow spat.
I fought griffins before. This'll be nothing.
Oh, you have you?
Silverblood mused.
Is that what happened to your eye, then?
Shut up!
Rainbow's tail whipped about behind her as she flared her wings, feeling the weight of her blades.
Let's go!
She launched herself forward before anyone could say anything else, blasting the room behind her with a powerful gust of wind that sent a few weights crashing to the ground with ear-splitting cracks. She had just enough time to see Garrett's eyes shoot wide in surprise before she slammed into him with both forelegs outstretched, throwing him into the air. His wings snapped open, arresting his fall. Rainbow grinned as they both faced each other down midair.
He's not so tough.
Excited applause rang out from Silverblood's balcony.
Oh, bravo! But don't stop already. The fight's not over until first blood.
Garrett risked an alarmed glance up at his employer before looking back to Rainbow, just in time to dodge her next charge. She roared in fury, twisting around midair to charge him again, and he lashed out with his talons. She ducked to the left, easily avoiding the blow and delivering a kick to his side with the hard tip of her hoof as she passed. He grunted, losing altitude before catching himself a few feet off the floor. Rainbow flew in lazy circles around him, keeping him on her right. It would have been trivial for her to dash in and land a hit with her wing blades, drawing blood and winning the bout, but she didn't want to just win. She wanted to dominate this griffin. She wanted to teach him a lesson, to leave him cowering in her shadow. She wanted to haunt his nightmares for the rest of his life. She swept in, avoiding his slow attempt at a counter and striking past his guard with ease. And as she passed the attack, her muzzle stretched into a manic grin. Tears blurred her vision, but she never let up the pressure. How many days had she dreamed of this moment? How many mornings had she woken from vivid night terrors of Gava stalking her from the shadows and got up to practice, to drill, to kill 100 imaginary foes and soothe her anguished mind? She'd promised herself so many times as her wings began to droop and her hooves grew heavy after hours of training, as she reached deep for one last kernel of drive to push her into the next drill.
You'll get your revenge. You'll make her pay. You'll make her hurt twice as much as she ever hurt you.
And now here she was. All the sweat, the tears, the blood. It was finally paying off. And as she brought her wings up for the killing blow, to extinguish the life from the struggling monster pinned underneath her, the tears streaming down her cheeks were of relief instead of fear.
I yield! I yield!
Rainbow blinked. It wasn't Gava under her hooves, throat exposed to her steel. This was Garrett. Someone else entirely. A griffin, yes, and perhaps even a griffin she hated. But this wasn't the rival that had consumed her thoughts for so long. And she wasn't on some imaginary battlefield. A cold chill came over her. Would she have killed him if he hadn't said anything? She looked up to Silverblood, who was leaning over the railing with obvious interest. He hadn't even tried to stop her.
What are you looking at me for, my dear?
He asked, grinning like a pony waiting for the punchline to his favorite joke.
I haven't seen any blood yet.
Slowly, Rainbow's brow furrowed. He hadn't stopped her because he didn't even care. He would have cheered like a fool at the circus as she killed his own bodyguard in front of him. She looked back down to Garrett. He had stopped struggling, but the fear in the griffin's eyes was obvious. There was a wetness brimming around them, barely visible, and a sudden surge of nausea welled up in Rainbow's gut. For a moment, she was looking down at herself, blood and tears alike streaming from her eyes, shivering under the monster that had hurt her. Rainbow felt numb as she stumbled backwards, falling heavily to her haunches, and Garrett picked himself up off the ground stiffly.
I win,
she said, looking down at her hooves. Her voice was distant. Silverblood let out an exasperated sigh.
I suppose it's clear enough who had the advantage in that particular affair. Quite the show, Rainbow Dash.
Rainbow looked up, meeting his eager gaze. She felt like she should be angry, but all she felt was a distant chill.
What would you do,
she asked.
if I had killed him?
Well, I would have offered you his job, of course.
Silverblood laughed, slapping a hoof against the railing.
That's how he got hired, you know. The best replacement for a bodyguard is often the one who beats them.
He let out a wistful sigh before perking up once more.
Not to imply that I'm not still offering you a job. All you have to do is stand by my side, look menacing, and stop anyone that tries to harm me. I think you'll find my contracts are quite competitive.
Unable to find the words to convey just how disgusted she was by the prince's offer, it was all Rainbow could do to shake her head in denial.
Oh, well. Never let it be said that I don't always make an attempt.
Silverblood's robe swirled around his hooves as he turned away, throwing his last words over his shoulder.
Looks like you keep your job, Garrett. I'll be taking lunch in my quarters, so do come up once you're all settled here.
Rainbow looked after him for a long moment, straining to comprehend how any pony could be so heartless towards their own. There was a cough from her right, and she turned to see Garrett regarding her warily.
You all right?
He asked.
What?
Rainbow shook her head in amazement.
I'm fine. Are you all right?
He gave her a strained grin.
Not my first time losing a fight. I'll be fine. You just seemed kind of distracted.
Rainbow sighed, looking away.
I got carried away. I'm sorry.